We're rolling.
Hello everybody, Gavin McCormack here. We're going to be learning all about birds and ornithology. As you can see behind me, we have a huge cliff face here filled with birds, and if you look carefully, you can actually see some birds sitting there on the beach. Now, this week we're going to be talking all about migration and how birds play an important role in the ecosystem here in the Arctic. And we are very fortunate to have Graham Snow here, who is an ornithologist. Graham, say hello.
Hi there everybody, how are you going?
Okay, now, one of my favourite birds here in the Arctic is the Arctic tern, Graham. Can you tell us a little bit about this remarkable bird? I hear that there is a bird here that flies all the way to Antarctica.
Yeah, that's right, the Arctic tern does that. It comes up here in this summer season and is breeding up here. We see them up here. They have bright red beak and a bright red legs and a black cap, and they're in their full breeding plumage, and they spend the summer up here having their young ones. But then when the winter starts to set in, they head off further south and they lose all that colour. And so I work in the Antarctic as well, and when we see them down there, they've travelled completely from one pole to the other, and they look different. They don't have their breeding plumage anymore. They're quite dull looking, but they spend the southern summer down there where it's much milder because it's harsh up here in the winter. And then they turn around and they go all the way back from the Antarctic, all the way back up here to the Arctic, and we see them again here, and they're back in their breeding plumage because it's the summer.
I hear that they can fly something like 2.7 million kilometres in their lifetime.
Over the course of a life, they can do that because they can live for maybe 20 years.
Wow.
And they're doing this round trip every single year. So 37,000 kilometres or so every year, and you add that up, and yeah, it's an amazing feat for such a small bird.
That's
as well.
amazing. Yeah, that's about 3 times to the moon and back in a lifetime. That's very far. And I hear they can sleep while they're flying.
They do. They don't sleep like we sleep. A lot of birds, especially seabirds, do that. They don't sleep for long periods. They have small naps or micro sleeps, or they can switch off half of their brain at a time, so they can continue to fly but also rest their brain and rest their body.
Amazing. I'd love to be able to do that. So it's really cold here. You know, it's really cold today. I haven't got gloves on, but it's freezing. I hear it can get to minus 40 up here. How do birds survive in the Arctic when it's so cold?
They have special adaptations. They have a lot of feathers. They have sometimes more feathers than other birds that are in warmer climates, so they have better insulation. And they also have features that allow them to cope with the cold, specific adaptations. Like many other seabirds, they spend a lot of time in the water, and the water is very cold, so they can lose a lot of heat through their legs. Obviously they have blood flowing down through their veins, down into their feet, and if you have that in the cold water, you just lose a lot of heat and a lot of energy. Yeah. And so what they do is they put the veins are located close to each other, and so instead of the blood going down and getting cold and then coming back up into their body and being cold when it comes into their body, they're quite close together, and so the heat gets transferred into the blood that's coming back into the body. It's called countercurrent circulation. And they can retain a lot of the energy that otherwise they would lose, and so it's much more efficient than just being losing all of that heat into the water. They retain that heat for themselves.
And that's why I guess birds standing on ice don't get frostbite like human beings would do.
Well, they have very sparse or thin flesh in their feet.
Right.
And they don't have a lot of veins, and they don't have a lot of blood flow and a lot of heat loss through there, and very leathery, sort of tough skin as well. So there's not a lot of soft fleshy skin like we have. We can lose a lot of heat.
Perfect.
They don't have that.
They're perfect for here. How important are they? You know, I've seen the birds on the cliff behind me flying around. How important are birds to the ecosystem, to the food chain? What role do they play in the food chain?
Yeah, well, this is a good example because here we can see it's really green on the slopes, and without the birds it wouldn't be like that at all. It would just be rocky and bare like the other parts of the island. So they go out to sea and they feed, and they eat fish and other invertebrates, copepods, mollusks, octopuses, things like that, and then they bring that back as food and they feed their young. Some of it they drop, the rest obviously they drop their waste at the bottom of the... They do that, they do a lot of that, and they bring back hundreds and hundreds of tons of nutrients from the sea to the land, and so they're a big transport system.
Wow.
They provide all this nutrient, all this fertilizer on the rocks, and that provides the requirements for all the grasses and all the other things to grow in the slopes below.
So basically, if there weren't birds fishing in this ocean here and flying up there to feed their young and poo onto the ground, there wouldn't be all this wonderful vegetation.
That's right, yeah.
Amazing. It's like a fertilizer delivery system.
Exactly, and because there are so many of them, there are tens of millions of them, they can bring back hundreds and hundreds of tons of fertilizer to the land.
Yeah. Now in winter, this is all frozen. This is ice, right? This is not the ocean like we see today.
That's right.
Do birds stay here in the winter?
Very few birds stay here. Like the Arctic terns, they leave. It's too harsh for them. But there are a couple of birds that do stay. There's a bird in Svalbard called the Svalbard ptarmigan, and it's a bit like the Arctic fox. In the summer it's brown, and in the winter, because it's all white and snowy and icy, they're completely white. And so they stay here, but they're one of the rare birds that do stay here year round.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing. So lots of birds migrate.
Most of them migrate further south, not as far as the Arctic tern. Most of them go down just to Europe or maybe northern Africa, where it's a bit warmer and they can cope quite well there. And then they come back the following summer.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, thank you so much, Graham. It's amazing to hear all the wisdom from you. Now, Graham is an ornithologist. Now, this week, we want you to be an ornithologist. And an ornithologist is someone who studies birds. This week, we want you to find a bird in your local environment, in your local community, a bird that you like the look of and that you want to study. Do a research project on that bird, but really importantly, find out the role that that bird plays in your local ecosystem and think about what would it be like if that bird was no longer alive in your community?